to you Miss Rita Gant, who is sitting right there but probably will not stand up. Please stand for just a minute, Rita. Rita is our office manager for Hospice of Burke County, and through her creativity and skills in the office, we have come a long way in 4 months even since we were able to hire her. She's available in our office in the First United Methodist Church in the basement from 9 to 1 Monday through Friday. She would welcome any of your telephone calls or any visits that you might make to talk about hospice or whatever you have on your mind. Again, I encourage you to approach any of these individuals at any time to learn more about hospice. We want to get the business of the meeting out of the way right now, and we will go through an election procedure to elect directors whom you will see listed in your program. New directors be the first state in the country to have a state hospice organization. I have known of and worked with the individuals in Hospice of North Carolina for 4 or 5 years, and I can tell you that they have been instrumental in facilitating and coordinating the development of hospice programs in this state. Because of that, I think we probably have more functioning hospice programs in this state than in any other state, and Judy may correct me on that. She's kind of going, But tonight we have with us Judy Lund, who is Executive Director of Hospice of North Carolina, and she's going to fill you in a little bit about where hospice is in North Carolina. Judy?
Thank you. I know some familiar faces out here, and when Linda called this morning and said, well, this other speaker from Knoxville is sleeted in Knoxville, and we're not sure she can come, and you know, if she doesn't come, could you fill in? And I said, well, you know, sure. And then she started worrying that I didn't know where the hospital was in Morganton now, and I had to tell her that before I came to hospice, I still traveled and came to Morganton an awful lot. And of course I would know where things were around here, but it's real nice to be here today. One of the things I think that's real important about having a hospice program and knowing a little bit about what else is going on in the state is that you begin to get a perspective on where you are in terms of what's happening around the state and what kinds of things are going on and what kinds of developments are happening and what things that you can anticipate running into in the coming months and even in the coming years. Amazingly enough, we are fortunate in this state to have a state organization, Hospice of North Carolina, that's been in operation for 5 years. We are also the proud, I guess you would call us parents, but anyway, of 13 local hospice groups that are currently providing care to patients and their families in North Carolina. They run the gamut of rural to urban, large staffed, and by large staffed we're talking about 5 employees rather than 1, to volunteer, and they are in great part a very diverse group of folks around the state. We have, in addition to that, another 12 programs that are in various farther along stages of development, far enough along so that they have affiliated, which is the formal relationship that we have with the local groups, with Hospice of North Carolina, and are in a stage similar to Hospice of Burke County, where you are getting ready to provide care, probably will be providing care sometime this year. We expect by the end of 1982 to have at least 10 of these 12 providing care to patients and their families. Just so you have some additional handles on kind of what the movement looks like in our state. We are talking about 700 patients and families that were served in 1981 by those 13 programs. We are talking about the ages of patients from 2 weeks to 99 years. So we are talking about a tremendous range in terms of age. And while the range is there, I think the 2-week-old infant with a congenital problem was kind of skewed us a little bit because the average age of most of our patients is in the 60s. So you're talking basically about a population that is over 60. You're talking about a patient population where the primary cause of the reason for referral to hospice is cancer, but not the only cause. because we are also dealing with some congestive heart failure, some advanced heart disease patients, some end-stage renal disease, the kidney failure kinds of things. We're dealing with a wide variety of other things in addition to cancer, but about 85% of the patients that we've seen are one form or another of cancer. Just so that you have, additionally, addition to the patient information, some information on what might be ahead for hospices like Hospice of Burke County. And I think one of the things that some of our programs, we have some programs now that the oldest one has been serving patients for 2.5 years. The kinds of things that they are beginning to face are different from what you are looking at right now, where you're trying to get it all together, you're trying to get volunteers, you're getting all your policies and procedures straight. All of that is very time-consuming, very important stuff. When you get to the place where those things are done, the set of problems becomes different. And you start struggling with how many patients can we serve at one time and maintain quality care? How can we afford to stay in business? What are the things that will help us to raise the money that it takes in order to operate an agency? Now, I really can't underscore that enough, because that is a tremendous problem for hospices, not only in our state, but across the country. We are talking about hospice programs where a good number of them may fold this year because we are struggling with where is the money going to come from? Can we rely enough on donations to fund what we consider to be, especially in the healthcare systems, a very small budgeted program in most places? But I think still the issue is, where is the money going to come from? And I raise it especially because one of the things that's a struggle is, how are hospice programs going to be able to claim insurance benefits? And that's one of the things that we're working on at the state level, and certainly we're working on at the national level, is what kinds of ways can insurance companies recognize that hospice care is both a cost saver as well as a beneficial kind of service for some of the patients that would be using very expensive hospital stays and traditional forms of treatment. So I think those are some of the struggles that a lot of programs are having. Another one is that we are not yet completely accepted into the mainstream of the healthcare delivery system. We have some physicians who say, no, I don't want any part of this. That's okay. Because hospice is not for everyone, and I would want to make sure that we said that at the very beginning, is that we experience, that there are some patients, and we certainly have had them in our programs, and various physicians have talked to them that said, now that I've heard about it, I don't think that this is really for me. And that's fine. That's perfectly okay. Hospice is one alternative that a patient who is terminally ill can use. But I think just the possibilities for it to be available is something that's very, very important. I think one of the other struggles that we have in our state, and certainly I'm sure that other states are facing this, is the amount of interest. Now you might say, well, isn't there lots of interest? Isn't that just really terrific? And one of the things that makes me concerned is that we have, in addition to the 25 programs that are both providing care and getting ready to provide care, another 25 who are calling our office saying, hey, we're interested, come and talk to us, how do we get a program started, how do we fund it, let's get this show on the road. And I get a little concerned that we are moving so quickly, and the bandwagon, or whatever, the snowball has gone so fast, that we may be missing some very important and critical issues in the hurry to make sure that care is available. And I would caution, as I caution every group, and I sometimes am labeled as the devil's advocate in this area, I would caution every group to make sure that you have done everything possible that you can do to provide the quality and to work out all the bugs before you ever open the door to that first patient, because that's a very important time to have everything together. And certainly, I'm sure that will happen very well here in Burke County. As Ben was saying, Hospice of Burke County is one of the 3 pilot projects that we selected for a Rural Hospice Project grant. It's a grant that we got from the Episcopal Church women through the United Thank Offering. If any of you are Episcopalians, maybe you know a little bit about the United Thank Offering, and some of the money went to Hospice of Burke County right here. What we are excited about is that you are the model for Western North Carolina. We are thrilled at the kind of progress that you all have had. We are thrilled with the enthusiasm of the board. We are thrilled with the way things have gone and developed so completely and so well. And we certainly are anxious to be able to use Hospice of Burke County as a model for other programs that are a little bit less far along than you are. So we are looking forward to that time, and especially looking forward to the time when you are past the stage that you are at, where you can say, well, we've gotten all the stuff together and we're doing the thing that we want to do the most, and that's to provide quality care for patients. One last thing that I would just like to talk about, since probably some of you are interested in volunteering for hospice. And I just wanted to give you some flavor of what that might be like, so that you have some notions about what volunteering for hospice might be. I think of all the things that we're talking about with hospice, one of the things that we spend a lot of time in the volunteer component talking about is all of it is flexible. The key word is we can't tell you what it's going to be like, because every patient is going to be different, and every patient is going to be involved, and every family is going to be involved in decision making about what needs to happen for them and what will make their last days the most comfortable. But let me give you a few examples. We have a patient in one of our programs that's been around for a while who was diagnosed as terminally ill and had a few months to live in the spring. It was an older gentleman. We have male volunteers as well as female volunteers who work with patients. And the gentleman said, you know, the thing that I want most, it doesn't really matter to me. I've got lots of family. I want people to come, and my family is fine. We'll be all right. But the thing that I want most from hospice is for someone to come and plant a garden outside my window and let me watch it grow. And that will be a very satisfying thing, because I've spent a lot of time in my garden and I can't do it, and I want somebody to do it so that I can enjoy it. The hospice nurse called the volunteers and said, I told you flexible, this is the thing. Here we have this need for a gardener. And one of their volunteers said, oh, sure, I'd be just glad to do that. And went and planted the garden, vegetables and flowers, whatever he could think of, whatever the man wanted, they did it. He came and tended the garden all summer, and they harvested a lot of the vegetables, and the man died as the last of the vegetables were harvested in the fall. He got lots of enjoyment out of it, but you would never think that that would be the kind of job that you would envision a hospice volunteer doing. Another one, which I think is even more interesting than this one, and I've tried in my own mind to imagine if I were a hospice patient, what would I want the most? And I don't know that this is it, but it comes kind of close. Another man said, the thing that I want most from hospice is for you to find me some partners for bridge. Come and play cards with me. Find me 3 partners, or find me so that we can have a foursome and come and play bridge a couple of times a week, until I just can't do it anymore, because that's the thing that I enjoy the most. And I want to spend my last days playing cards. And again, the hospice nurse said, well, we'll see what we can do, and volunteers came forward for that job as well. Not all of the jobs that volunteers are doing are directly associated with patients, and I think that's a real important thing to make note of, because there may be some of us who say, hey, I'm real interested in hospice, but I'm not sure that I want to work directly with a patient and their family. So what we've also experienced is lots of volunteer jobs that are related to helping patients and families, but not directly going in, sitting with the family, talking to the patient, spending a lot of time in that area, but rather to do some of the supportive things. Some of the families say, the thing that we want most is to have dinner together for a change. And could somebody come and bring dinner in for us, because we don't have time to make it, but if you could bring dinner in, we could all sit down and enjoy it together. and be a family for a change. And a lot of volunteers have spent a little bit of time preparing dinner to take to a hospice family. A lot of our hospice patients are on a good number of medications. Volunteers have gone and picked up medications, dropped them off at the house, gone grocery shopping, done transportation duty, all that sort of stuff. So we're talking about a wide range of things that wouldn't necessarily be related directly to a patient and family and being with a patient and family every day. So just to give you some notion of some of the things that have been happening with hospice volunteers, I'm sure Nancy will give us more information on that from her perspective, but that kind of gives you a nutshell of what some of the interesting things are that have been happening with hospice volunteers around the state. I'll be around for a little while after, so if you have other questions about hospices in other parts of the state, we'd be glad to answer them. But congratulations on your first annual meeting. I think you're just going really well. Thank you.
Well, I get the real pleasure this evening of introducing our guest speaker. She's the hospice nurse coordinator at Fort Saunders Hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee. This is a hospital-based hospice, which there are some differences, but again, you'll find many similarities to what we're doing here. We are not hospital-based. One thing that came to mind today after I talked to Nancy this morning with the weather, thought of Jim Monahan and the Postal Service and the statement that they have, come rain, hail, sleet, or snow, and I hope I have it right, Jim, the mail must go through. Well, I think hospice coordinators even have more fortitude maybe than postal workers, because when I called Nancy at 11 o'clock this morning, when she said that everything is covered with ice, it's very bad. My husband had 5 hours to get home in about what normally takes about 9 minutes last evening. He abandoned his car along the highway, so believe it or not, it's bad over there. But she said, I'll get there if at all possible. And they got here just in time to gulp a quick supper and get over here. But I do think it does say something for the dedication of the hospital personnel. Marilee and I had the opportunity last fall to hear Nancy speak at the Crisis of Death workshop over in Knoxville. And we, of course, immediately fell in love with her personality, dedication, and the compassion that she has for others. And I'm sure that you'll find as you listen to Nancy this evening a real motivation to participate in such a humanitarian organization as the hospice. So I present to you Nancy Kerr. I also want to just say that her husband is sitting there next to her, Jim, and I hope he helped her drive over here, so we appreciate it.
I just want you to know I'm very, very happy to be here. And it was kind of hairy. It really was. I mean, pea soup fog and all that good stuff. And I also want you to know I'm jealous of you. I became Fort Saunders hospice nurse 3.5 years ago. And, you know, I'd been out for a long time with a son with a badly smashed leg. And every time I wanted to go back to work, something would happen. But this particular time, I'd read in the newspaper that Fort Saunders was going to start a hospice program, and I thought, that's my kind of work. So I was a fish volunteer that day. I don't know if you know about fish, but I imagine a lot of places do have it. It's sort of a church-oriented organization helping out the poor. And the next day I went in to apply, and I sort of bargained with the master. I said, okay, if you want me to work in this, I want a free parking place right by the hospital. So I cruised on in, and it was all bogged up, and then all of a sudden a big station wagon pulled out, and I pulled in. So I went in, and I volunteered to be part of the hospice program. And they looked at me funny, because this was a hospital I'd worked at all the time that I did work. And they said, I said, how far along is it? And they said, well, we must have been waiting for you, because, you know, nobody's been hired, nothing's been done. So all of a sudden, instead of being a part of hospice, I discovered I was it. And so I went to New Haven at one point, but prior to that I'd been to Baltimore and Silver Springs to see their home health stuff and all that. Because we were the first in the state. Nobody knew anything about anything. We were floundering around, and I am so jealous of you. You know, I felt so lonely. I had nobody to help me, and here you've got this marvelous group of people who are all ready to start, and I think that's absolutely fabulous. How many of you are going to be volunteers? Isn't that absolutely wonderful? I think that I am going to learn from you. I'm not sure I can teach you anything, but I can tell you of some of the mistakes we've made, and our volunteer program is pathetic. We have had a few who have been wonderful, but they've either gone into nurses training or they've gone back to school or they've done something. We've got one wonderful volunteer who has been attached to several of our families. But at the moment she's working with this little stubborn 72-year-old lady who had rectal bleeding for about a year. And, you know, I said, Stacy, why didn't you do something about that? And she said, well, I thought it was my arthritis of the spine. And I said, now, Stacy. And she said, yeah, I know. So she is having a very miserable way of dying with tremendous pain and all the rest of it. And she told me one day not too long ago, you know, I love you and Beth. I have a partner named Beth, and you're wonderful to me, and I know I can trust you always to be here when I need you and stuff like that. But Virginia is my friend, and I think that's what hospice volunteers are all about. You're a friend who can be trusted. And it's not the easiest job in the world, that's for sure. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the patients we've had that'll give you an insight into some of the things you might get involved in. This same Virginia was part of a family of a 20-year-old we had. She was 19 when she first came into our care, and she was 4 months pregnant. And who would think that anything was wrong with a little 4 months old pregnant 19-year-old? But she had come to the emergency room several times with back pain, and so everybody would give her a pill and send her home and pat her on the head and say, you're okay. And then she suddenly started losing the use of her legs. And she was brought into the hospital and had an emergency laminectomy, and what she really had was a strange form of cancer that nobody could identify for a while. Ultimately, they did say it was a Ewing sarcoma. Well, normally Ewing sarcoma is in the long bones, and it's in kids in their early teens. She was 19, and it was in her spine. It didn't fit any pattern, you know. So the first thing we're doing is radiating her back, and everybody's got this big question mark, what's happening to little who's it? And then little who's it has to be aborted with prostaglandins at UT Hospital. And, you know, you die a little inside, you know what's going to happen. I often wondered since, would it have been better if she'd just gone ahead and had that baby and not gone through chemotherapy and stuff? But this is what they chose to do, with advice from physicians and such. And I had my doubts in a way, but you couldn't discourage her from that. So this was in February when she first came into our care, and I guess it was about March or April when the baby was aborted. And the baby weighed over 1 pound, so it had to have a regular burial, and the little husband had to bury it beside his mother, who had died 4 years earlier. This hurts. You know, it was tremendously painful for everybody who had anything to do with it. And Virginia and her family had really come into this whole scene, and it was getting to be Christmas time. Melissa was dying. She was back in the hospital at this time. We had to bring her back in the hospital. And Virginia said, what would you give your family if you wanted to go out shopping and get them stuff? So she had a list of stuff, and Virginia's children went shopping, and they got all these gifts and had them wrapped. And Melissa died on December the 12th. But she had Christmas for them. And you can imagine how that affected the family, receiving Christmas gifts from Melissa even though she was dead. These are things that hurt. But these are also marvelous things that hospice volunteers get involved in, as well as hospice nurses. What do you look for in hospice volunteers? I think the one real important thing to have is a sense of humor. You know, we tend to get in there and we're death and dying experts, big D and D, and this kind of turns me off. I don't know about you. I'm in the business of living. I'm in the business of helping that patient and that family to live as fully as they possibly can until they die. And I'm probably terrible because I tease them and I kid with them, and we do try to have a lot of laughter going on because I think laughter is very good for everybody. What do you look for in a hospice volunteer apart from the sense of humor? What do they do for fun? And Joy Euphemer was the speaker at the National Hospice Organization meeting I just went to in St. Louis, and she's a very fascinating young lady. I think I'd hate to work for her because she's tough. But she's also one of the people who has really done a tremendous amount in this country to start caring for the dying. And of course, she was very unpopular when she first started it. But she was describing interviewing hospice volunteers, and she was mentioning one day about a little blind lady who came. She was very tiny. Her feet didn't hit the floor when she sat in a chair. And she and her husband wanted to be volunteers together. And Joy started asking her, what do you do for fun? And the fun things they did was go to the Cerebral Palsy Center one day a week, and they'd go take these terribly disturbed children or something like that, none of which was any fun. And you know, for a while there, she thought, oh, how wonderful to have a blind volunteer. I mean, this sounds wonderful that here's somebody who's blind who's going to volunteer. And then she said, I almost allowed her blindness to blind me. And I can see that. You know, how can you turn down somebody who's blind who wants to be a volunteer? But the little lady, when she finally said, we can't use you, just had a tremendous tantrum. She was very angry because she was all set to be a hospice volunteer. They really wanted to be in there doing good and all that. I'm going to have a drink if you don't mind. It's like the little Cub Scout who was emceeing his den meeting, and he told his mother later it was real weird. Everything was wet except his mouth. And I think you get real dry. Okay. Another thing that needs to be done in hospice is when you're hiring people to be your nurses, etc., be very careful. Be very choosy who you use, because you can't use somebody who's going to burn out very easily. And, you know, sometimes they have sort of symptoms that they're not going to be able to take it in the long run. And it isn't easy work. I'm not pretending it is, but I personally love it. And I do not burn out. But I feel very, very sure that the master is there helping me when I need to go on my appointed rounds. And, you know, there have been times when I've arrived on a doorstep and they say, how did you know we needed you? I didn't, but he told me. And it's just amazing. You just happen to be used in a flexible kind of a way, and you just happen to arrive when it's needed. Don Whitehead, who was a famous Pulitzer Prize winner and author, wrote the FBI story and stuff like that, was a delightful person and a very interesting man. But when he became my patient, he was dying of metastatic lung disease to his brain, and it was so sad to see this marvelous brain and its assault. His daughter was up visiting from Florida, and it was one of those times when I arrived on the doorstep and she said, how did you know I needed you? And she was not aware that he was really dying, but he was. So naturally you stay until it's all over and take care of it. Some of my other patients, okay, a 28-year-old. Our patients now are becoming older, but for a long while there we were having awfully young patients, and it got to be really sad. Pam was 28. She had had a mole on her back and had been home visiting from Ohio, and her mother saw it and she said, Pam, you've got to have something done about that. So she goes to her doctor and he burns it off, and he does nothing about biopsy or anything else. And it came back, and he did it again, and it came back a third time, so she went to another doctor and he cut it out, and it was melanoma, and by then it had already started its miserable invasion of her poor little body. And here was a lovely family, very caring and very loving. Pam was in a hospital bed beside a lovely window with a dogwood tree and flowers all around its foot with a bird feeder, and she could lie there in that bed and look out of the window and see all this going on. When I die, I want to be in my own bed with 3 Siamese cats. And I don't know about you, but the death does not worry me a bit, but dying does. This business, when you lose your handle on life and you have to depend on others for your every need, I think that's terrifying. So I can certainly relate to my patients when they are in this situation. And here again, volunteers are wonderful people, but here again, we have to learn not always to be there, you know, to be able to back off. There was related by somebody. I want to tell you all, one of the most valuable books you can get is the Royal Victoria Hospital Palliative Care Manual. There's more stuff in there than you can imagine. But there was a section in there on volunteers, and in this one situation, a daughter was exhausted, and she put her head down on the bed by her father's side, and somebody immediately came and said, "That's right, honey, you just have a good cry." Well, she felt terrible because she wasn't really feeling like crying, she was just tired. Others who came and bought drinks and coffee and an ear if necessary, but not push on there if you weren't really needed at that time. Families and patients both need more than anything else somebody who will listen. And sometimes it's an outsider that they will talk to. They don't want to hurt their family. They don't want to upset them. They play these silly games. And if you can prevent them, you know, get them